Hi and welcome to the AVCA video tip of the week sponsored by Volleyball One-on-One. I'm super excited. I've got Bill Ferguson, one of our great coaches here at Volleyball One-on-One. And today we're going to be talking about some fun stuff as it relates to how Bill runs the BIC Set over at USC as well as for his club team. Now Bill has got quite a resume. He's a two-time AVCA Coach of the Year, and he also has one of the most successful volleyball clubs in the country called SCVC. So Bill, I'm excited. So we're going to be talking about this the BIC and how you run this BIC.
Yeah. Well, we got a bunch of different ways of doing it. As you can see here, we have 4 different BIC sets. For us, the BIC is a series of back row tempo sets, not just one type of set. Most of the programs that are out there are running basically one type of BIC that's floating, that is dictated by the location of the setter and the pass and the quick hitter. We've expanded on it. Part of it was by necessity. Back when I first got here, we didn't quite have the personnel we wanted. So we had to figure out different ways to do things and be successful and challenge our opponent.
Well, let's catch everyone up. I think the BIC is kind of the biggest change in volleyball offense in the last
10 years. Yeah.
10 years. And what it does is basically it's a fast set over the middle so that when the middle is coming down, you're running an attack out the back row.
Correct. I like to look at it as a back row tempo set or a different layer of offense, if you will.
Okay, now the biggest thing that I often get, especially with new coaches, high school, is what is the tempo that the player should be running at? Like when should their heel hit the ground in terms of stepping and coming in?
So when we talk about this, our context is almost everything we hit is a 4-step off of a 4-step approach. So you hear about a go set being a 2nd step set.
Okay.
For us, the BIC is a 3rd step set. And we want that. We want our attacker, the heel of their 3rd step, to be on the ground as the ball is being released by the setter.
So as that ball is being released, they're taking their 3rd step going into their last 2 steps.
Correct.
Okay, good. And it's the same for all the ways you run it.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the setter will have to change speeds just a little bit depending on how far the ball has to travel from the setter to the attacker. And for us, that's on the setter.
Okay, great. So now, based upon the set, it seems like you divide it up based upon the court. So you've got your gap, your push, your front one, and your back one. Is that
those
correct?
are the 4 quick sets that we run here at USC. And we've drawn them here and had different colors so you can see how they relate to the different BIC sets that we have. Now you see the gap and the 30 here. That's something we don't necessarily run together, but when we want to get into any kind of mismatch with regard to misdirection, sometimes you'll see us run a gap and a 40 to try to stretch and make the other team's middle blocker really make a decision. That'll force the opponent's middle blocker to really cover 10 feet of court laterally in a really short period of time. So
that's an interesting point too. Unlike a lot of teams, that the goal of the BIC is to always run it over the middle.
Correct.
You guys are not necessarily always running it over the middle. You guys might run a gap with a 40 or a front one with a 30 or.
Yeah, we're able to attack teams that maybe have their middle front or dedicate step to or towards the direction of the pass. So we always have, well, if we run a misdirect, we almost are going to have 2 attackers that are going to go the opposite direction of the flow of the play. If we run an overload, obviously there's going to be the overload into whichever zone at whatever blocker. But this allows us to either A, pick on a weak blocker, or B, to pick on an open zone based on the tendency of the opponent's middle blocker.
Wow, that's very, very powerful stuff. And what's great is you're going to get to see some videos of Bill and his team running this. And I promise you, what's so phenomenal is you look at this and how many times these guys are going up against nothing. Like the middle's down and you're like, oh my gosh, and here comes this BIC over the top just crushing it. Okay, so let's quickly go through them. You've got your back, your gap, your push, your front one, your back one. Then you've got, based upon the location,
Yeah.
your 30 set, you called it a 30.
Yes.
What do they call that online? What do they set it called?
Different hand signals. Basically, it depends from setter to setter, whatever they're comfortable calling.
Okay, then you got a BIC. That's your what everyone considers a traditional BIC.
Correct.
Okay, and it's a location. Is that correct?
Sometimes it's location, sometimes it's based off where the setter is. Now that's the beauty of what we're able to do is we're able to run a floating BIC, if you will, where the setter, the middle, and the BIC hitter are all within about 6 feet of each other, and that's based here in this diagram. So the pass can be pushed towards zone 2. We can still run the BIC. We can perfect pass. We can run it, and if it's a little bit left of the timeline, we can run it.
So Bill, you said something interesting. The timeline. What is the timeline?
So we have what's called the timeline, which is this vertical line that divides the court in half.
Okay.
And most of our offense and/or defensive concepts, we have the timeline as a reference point, either from where, and for this purpose, where our offense is run from. So a perfect pass for us is run just to the right of the timeline, but sometimes that's not always going to happen, and that's where the timeline becomes important, is if a play gets blown up or we're in a contingency situation, we have a point of reference where we can tell our hitters to go to, we can tell our setter to set towards, so it just becomes something that's very easy for us.
So it's almost a location that's your point of reference.
This is our North Pole in our compass.
Okay, great. So what we're going to do is is there anything else you want to add? I think these are pretty self-explanatory.
Yes, this is, I think, right on. So this would be a perfect setter, front one BIC, and perfect 40 and all that. Now, and then this will talk about the different locations of the sets when you start getting perfect towards area 2 or just across the timeline. For us, we feel like if we're going to run a floating BIC, this is the space of the court with which to do it. If it gets too far this way, then we're going to get a clog, or we're going to have a setter, a quick hitter, a BIC hitter, and a go hitter. And yes, that is a lot for a block, but it's also a lot for us to have that many people in that condensed area. Yeah.
Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to cut through to some videos so that you can actually see how these plays are run. So here you go. So we are back, okay. And the next thing I want to ask you, Bill, is how do things change now? And you know, obviously we've got these courts here when you have now starting to have a bad pass.
Yeah.
And also, like, tell me a little bit about how you can use some of this to trick people.
Well, for us, we always want to be able, we don't want to punt, so to speak, if we don't have to. So we have different, if you look on the diagram to the far right, a ball that's passed towards area 2, okay, that's where the setter's going to be. We're going to pen malfunction. Okay, that's the setter's going to be there, our quick's going to come in right about here. Now our BIC is probably going to be right over. Now if the setter gets pushed over here, what are we going to do? We run the BIC here, yeah, maybe. We got a hitter here. Let's just go right side hitter. Okay, but a lot of times what we'll do is once we know the pass gets pushed wide into a zone, we will have our BIC hitter go to the timeline. And that's an easy spot for our setter to remember. It's an easy spot for our hitters to remember. And it's a good way to spread the defense. A lot of times you'll have a blocker here and a blocker here. Once the pass gets this way, this blocker will leave, that blocker will leave. This guy will be concentrating on the probably outside over here. Okay, so then you've got a big hole. He's now over here. Now we've got a big hole to hit down.
And this is also really effective if you have a middle that likes to front the middle.
Correct.
Right? So if you got a player that's like, I'm going to front and commit to this middle, you basically can run your offense a little bit more to the right, and you just open up the entire center of the court.
Correct.
And I've seen that in some of the videos. I think if you look back at some of those videos, you'll see that just happening over and over again, and especially if you've got a good, strong middle.
Correct.
Cool. Now, the other thing that I thought which was really interesting, and this is more for women's volleyball, you guys aren't running it as much, or if you have a weaker opposite player.
Yeah.
Tell me about the 60 set and how you would run this with a slide or as an alternative almost to a D, because that's a very interesting play. I like that.
Yeah, well, what we had when I first got here at SC, we didn't have really we had a freshman opposite that we thought had some promise. And then beyond that, we really didn't have a true opposite, so we needed to find a way to attack that side of the court. Sure. And one of our best players at the time was Juan Figueroa, who's now one of the outside hitters on the Puerto Rican national team. And so what we did was we created a 60. Juan most of the time had to pass, so we'll just put him here and write 60. Let's just say it's a perfect pass, and for teams where their middle is maybe here, okay, and then we got their outside hitter here in the front row passing, okay. So what we did was, because Juan had to pass, he couldn't get all the way out to hit a D.
Yeah.
So if you're one of your left side players who has to pass is one of your best back row attackers, it's a great way to free them up and to get them outside. So essentially, we would have Juan pass. He never really hit out of the back row. This was as far left as he would pass. So then we just had him attack this zone, which wasn't all the way out. So it was a good way for us to keep this blocker guessing. Is he going to go out and get the D? Is he going to block the 60? And once he started keying inside, inside, inside to get the quick, if he'd either help on the front quick, okay, then we could run the 60 or the D. It made it easier for the D attacker. So that's a lot for this one blocker to think about. Now, if they committed this blocker here outside, then we knew we could go somewhere else. But where I think this can be really good in the women's game, where the slide is a predominant set, is now you bring the middle's going to kind of run a slide this way. Okay, so this blocker most of the time is going to have to block here. Okay, so that frees up this 60 hitter to hit inside. Okay, now if this person's successful hitting, this blocker is going to have to either go out wide, forcing the middle to help, and if that's the case, then we just set out here.
One-on-one.
Yeah, we're one-on-one here. Or if this blocker is going to commit and go this way, or commit to blocking the go, and you have the right side blocker here, you have two blockers here, and one blocker here that has to make a decision on two very quick attacks. So we always feel like we're in the advantage for some of our girls teams if we're running this.
That is really a phenomenal thing. And what's great is that blocker so often is chasing out and going like this. So now if they're trying to come back into the court, it's a next.
Yeah. Whereas it's a misdirect for this side of the court, it's obviously an overload for this side of the court. So again, you're going to have to find out, A, what your team is capable of doing, but also what your opponent's weakness is. And that's really the key. What can we do? That's the first decision. And then, based on what we can do, how can we exploit our opponent's weaknesses?
Okay, and the other thing that I saw is if you have a bad pass this way,
yes.
So now you're still running that middle, but you're using the timeline to run the BIC through the center.
Correct. So now I'll use the red pen here. So you see the blue. We'll do the arrows of the spatial relation here. Now, if you have the setter, if the ball gets passed over here, it's really going to be really difficult to really even run quick. But you can still run it quick. You still have your outside go hitter, okay? Then you have, what does your outside do? Do you just not hit? No, for us, we always want to hit. And again, it's going back towards the timeline so that now we have two hitters in this zone, or we'll write 40. Now this hitter goes to the timeline and hits back. Okay, that's one way of doing it, to the timeline. If your players are in rhythm with your setter, they can go directly behind the setter as well and float and follow. We've had hitters that like to go to the timeline because they know exactly where it is and where the ball's going to be. We've also had hitters that have said, hey, I want to go right off the back of the setter because that's easier for me to locate. Either way, we feel like we're in the advantage here, and for this, we want to cater to our player and make sure they are most comfortable with either of these two sets, and whichever one they want to do, we go for it. So sometimes it's to the spot, sometimes it's to the setter.
Okay, now what's great is if you go back and look at those videos that we showed you earlier, you're going to see some of this, and I'm telling you, it's incredible, because what happens is, as soon as you start moving left like this, you start having this middle fronting moving across, and now you've got a floated up set here down the middle, and they're just crushing it because the left side blocker has to respect the opposite.
Yeah, lots of times this will end up being the middle blocker fronting the quick situation. You have a blocker here, and then this person has to make a decision. Are they going to stay and block this? And if so, you have your right side attacker. Are they going to go out here on the right side attacker, opening this up?
Yeah, and most of the time this is open. It was great watching it.
Yeah, it's a huge open part of the court that we like to exploit.
Okay, so that's some really good stuff. Thank you so much, Bill.
You're welcome.
Okay, make sure you check out all his videos. He also did a full thing on this through the AVCA that I think they're going to be bringing out this month.
Correct. It should be on their online magazine here next month.
Okay.
And it's also available through the AVCA if you go back and get the convention videos.
Okay, so that's also very good. We also filmed 5 hours of video.
Wasn't that long? Wow.
5 hours. Where we did a full USC practice in the morning. We then went to his office, asked him a bunch of questions about coaching and how to be a great coach and some of his mentors and some of that stuff. And then we followed it up by an evening practice where we filmed him coaching his 15-year-old boys club team. And what was phenomenal about watching all of this is seeing how he applies so much of the USC practice to the juniors. So for all you high school coaches and club coaches, this was invaluable, and you're going to absolutely love this stuff.
I think the one thing, if I may interrupt, we do these same concepts with the team you'll see me train is our 15-year-old boys team, and most of the concepts we do, like you said, we are throwing these variations at 15-year-olds, and they're able to understand it and able to run it.
Now, your team is the best in the country, so maybe the rest of you are 16-year-olds, but yeah, it's phenomenal. That's great.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Okay, so make sure you check out the link below, volleyball101/Bill Ferguson, to see all the videos, and make sure you visit our site to see all our 1,500 plus other videos by over 26 instructors. And thank you.